The first month of NFL football is in the books. There's a lot that has changed since the beginning of this season, tons of surprises, so it's time for a power rankings update heading into the month of October. And do keep in mind that this video was made before any team played this month, so things are subject to change. This is just how I'm feeling about every team after the first month of play. Let's go 1 through 32, and I'll try and go as fast as humanly possible for time's sake, so let's just dive straight into this thing, starting off with number 32, where I'm sticking the Tennessee Titans. While it's true they did win on Monday night, it was probably the most unimpressive win humanly possible, beating a Tua-less Miami Dolphins team down to their third string quarterback, and it took Will Levis getting injured for this game to even open up to begin with. This team has a quarterback nightmare scenario. They're absolutely awful, and under any normal circumstance, they're losing 10 times out of 10. In my opinion, they've looked like the worst team in the league, hands down. Speaking of the Dolphins, I'm actually sticking them at number 31. This may seem way too low, knowing the talent they have, but at the end of the day, we have to rank them based off of what we see right now. And unfortunately, they are dead to right without Tua. Without any sort of competent quarterback play, they are going to be a bottom team through and through. What I saw on Monday night against the Titans was all I needed to see. This team's just not going to win any games until Tua comes back. And even with him, they barely won their game against the Jaguars, who are 0-4 right now. Dolphins have not been having a great season, and without Tua, they're going to be absolutely terrible. So I feel like this ranking is pretty fair. At number 30, I'm sticking the New England Patriots. They looked pretty good to start this season, but the last few games have not been kind to them. They've come back down to earth just as the team they were advertised to be on paper. Their offense just isn't putting up any points at all. They feel extremely irrelevant. They took advantage of a Bengals team that got off to a slow start as well. Just very unimpressive stuff from this team, and I feel like they are very easily bottom 5 in the league. At the 29 spot, I'm going with the Jaguars. They're in a similar scenario to the Dolphins, where I feel their overall talent on their roster isn't indicative of this ranking, but when going by performance and what we've seen on the football field, they have not been promising. They've been in a lot of games, but they've failed to capitalize in any of them. They could realistically be 3-1 right now, but they're not. And you simply cannot put the only winless team in the league any higher than this. If anything, you'd probably consider putting them lower. They just haven't been good. This season in the Trevor Lawrence era has been a disaster so far, and it seems like playoffs are already all but out of their reach. And at number 28, I'm surprisingly going with the Carolina Panthers. It seems insane knowing the start they had to the season, but since switching to Andy Dalton, they've looked like a competitive football team, not only beating the Raiders, but giving the Bengals a good run for their money and keeping that game close throughout the entire contest. Unfortunately, you do have to keep in mind the horrible games they had to start, but they are a completely different football team with Bryce Young on the bench, which I think is also worth considering when putting them somewhere in the rankings. At the 27 spot, I'm going with the Cleveland Browns. I'd like to put them lower, but their defense is always going to be a threat. You can't count them out completely. That could lead to some wins here in this second month of the season. We saw a similar thing happen in 2023. Wouldn't be surprised if it happened again here. But at the end of the day, this team has looked absolutely terrible. Deshaun Watson is holding this team back so badly. They couldn't even beat the freaking Giants, for crying out loud. The Browns are awful, and they are very easily bottom 10 in the league. At 26, I am going with the Giants. I want to put them lower, but there's been a lot of teams that have just been so bad, and this Giants team could be 3-1 right now. They're in a similar situation to the Jaguars. Now, they've failed to execute at every corner possible, which is why they are one of the worst teams in the league, but Malik Neighbors has looked promising, and if they had a good kicker, and if they actually could throw the ball downfield, they could have beat the Cowboys as well. I feel like this team is a quarterback away from being relevant, but unfortunately, number 8 is holding them back. And at the 25 slot, I'm putting the LA Rams. Again, kind of like with the Dolphins, maybe not indicative of how high they should necessarily be, but right now they're in a rough situation with injuries, with both Puka and Cooper Kupp being on IR. It just severely limits the potential of their offense. Matt Stafford is having some of the most random people ever be his top targets for a game, and the defense also gets exposed time after time. This Rams team couldn't even beat the Cards. I think they got pretty lucky in a freak game against the 49ers. So as of right now, until they get healthier, they're definitely one of the worst teams out there. Speaking of the Cardinals, I'm sliding them into my number 24 spot. They've shown some excellent potential on offense. Loved what I saw the first few weeks against Buffalo and the way they crushed the Rams. That Marvin Harrison Jr. Kyler Murray connection could be promising for a long time to come. but it's just come in spurts, and that's the issue. There's so many ups and downs where one week they can drop 30 on you, then the next two they're barely even able to put up 10. Saw them get blown out by the Commanders. They weren't able to get the job done against Detroit. I'm not a fan of that inconsistency, and that just means at the end of the day, they are mid. And at 23, I cannot believe I am saying this right now. I'm putting the Denver Broncos down. Broncos, it didn't start off too great for you guys in those first few weeks. It was absolutely horrendous to watch you play football, but you've managed to beat two good teams in a row, Tampa and the Jets. You held two high-octane offenses, two solid quarterbacks to under 10 points each, and that is something that you have to give a lot of credit for. This defense is dangerous, and they are clearly capable of keeping this team in just about any game they play this season, no matter how bad the offense may look. Now, because the offense sucks, it severely limits their potential and how high they could go in the rankings right now, but you've got to acknowledge what they've done the last few weeks, so they definitely get a big boost in the rankings compared to the preseason. At the number 22 spot, I'm going with the Vegas Raiders. Honestly, they're more so this high just because there's been a lot of other teams that are either in rough situations or are just clearly worse than them. They're just barely avoiding the destruction around them, I feel like. They got a quality win over the Ravens, but generally have looked very up and down. Mediocre team so far. Looking to see them take that next step, but I don't know if they will. So right now, I'm going to safely put them around the middle of the pack. And in a similar fashion, at 21, we're putting the Chicago Bears. A team that's just been walking by the explosions, just barely coming out of it alive at 2-2 somehow, some way. Offensively, it's been a real struggle. Caleb Williams is having a tough time adjusting to the NFL right now, making a lot of poor choices overall, not unlocking the true potential of that offense. But luckily for them, their defense has kept them in a lot of games so far, and they find themselves at 500, still in the mix to potentially make it to the playoffs if they continue to improve. I'm not a huge fan of this Bears team, but they have the talent to make it work. We're just looking to see if they can make that jump with Caleb in the offense now. Number 20, the Indianapolis Colts. This team's been interesting. Lots of ups and downs. Sometimes Anthony Richardson looks like a god. Other times you ask yourself what the hell he is doing. But genuinely, this Colts team has been competitive through and through. They're only 2-2, but there's a world where they could very easily be undefeated or potentially winless right now. Every matchup they have played has been a one-score contest. And in those matchups, there's been some good and certainly some bad. They almost beat the Texans, and they managed to get a big win over the Pittsburgh Steelers, who arguably have the best defense in the league. And then there's that matchup they had against the Packers and Malik Willis at the same time. Just all over the place with this football team. But clearly, they're very capable of being a high-level team with how they manage to be in every single game. They're getting a lot of experience there, which is something that you definitely have to keep in the back of your mind as we head into the late stages of this season. And if we see more Joe Flacco going forward, if this Richardson injury ends up being serious, there's a chance for the passing game to look a bit more consistent, and for some of their guys like Josh Downs and Michael Pittman to take it to the next level. This Colts team is certainly worth watching very carefully, but for now, they're definitely middle of the pack. Number 19, I'm going with the Cincinnati Bengals. Yes, I know that they're 1-3, and it's kind of crazy to put a 1-3 team at number 19, but I genuinely feel like this Bengals team is going to turn the corner and play better here in the month of October, probably after the Baltimore game is over. I mean, just like with the Colts, they've been in every game they have played. Realistically, they could be undefeated right now if they had a defense, if they didn't play like crap in week 1. But that's all what ifs at the end of the day. They have to drop in the rankings compared to the preseason with the horrible start they had. I still have a lot of trust in Joe Burrow to help turn that ship around, but this is looking like a pretty rough season for them. They're going to be competitive no matter what, but if they're not winning those games, they simply cannot be top half of the league. Number 18, the New York Jets. This team has been very mid so far to start the season. I am disappointed with what I've witnessed so far from this Jets team. Defensively, not all that impressive, but more than anything else, their offense has not been getting the job done. Outside of New England, it has not been moving. Aaron Rodgers and the team look sluggish. They're not getting their star playmakers involved. And when you look at how they've done this season, their wins come against the Patriots and the Titans, two of the worst teams in the league. And outside of that, it has been pitiful to watch. Clearly, they're many steps below a top team like the 49ers, and they couldn't even put up 10 points against the Broncos, for crying out loud. And just knowing that Rodgers is old, and we don't know how serious this injury is, I feel like you have to put the Jets around the middle mark. Number 17. The Dallas Cowboys. Let's keep it straight and to the point. This team has been hella mid to start the season. They cashed in on some easy opponents in the Browns and the Giants, and they almost lost that game to the Giants. If they had a real quarterback, they probably do lose that game, which is absolutely unacceptable. And at the end of the day, they've just not been impressive. They can't run the football, and their defense has been less than stellar. They've been having a hard time against the run. The pass defense has taken a step back. This Cowboys team looks the worst they have in a very, very long time, and they're just mediocre at best right now until further notice. Number 16, the LA Chargers. They've taken a bit of a fall off since their hot start to the season, but they've been in basically every game they've played so far. The defense has taken some notable strides in the right direction, including a great performance against the Chiefs. I mean, they did everything they could to keep their team in the game. I've been impressed with the philosophy that Harbaugh has brought to this team. He has made for a quick turnaround. They look like they could be in contention for the playoffs, and if Justin Herbert can get it going with the offense just a bit more, they could become pretty dangerous. I'm a little disappointed that they lost that game to the Steelers, but Herbert got injured and everything. It is what it is. The Chargers still are a tough team week in and week out. Number 15, the New Orleans Saints. This is another coulda, woulda, shoulda situation, but this team could very easily be undefeated right now if a couple of plays go differently. And that's the big thing, right? They've looked great against the teams that they should be, blowing them out in the process. And in the other games, they've shown they can hang in there with other top-level competitors like the Eagles and the Falcons. This Saints team is right where they need to be. They've shown notable progress. The offense is high-flying, a little inconsistent, yes, but the potential is there. And who the hell knows what's going to happen with Devontae Adams. Maybe they're the ones to pull the trigger and make a trade for him happen, and if that's the case, their offense is going to be even crazier. That defense is tough as well. I love where the Saints are at, and they're a team that is definitely worth monitoring very closely. Number 14, the Philadelphia Eagles. I won't lie, this team probably could be a lot lower, but I'm trusting that heading into this month, they'll get healthier with the receivers, and they'll start to look more like that again with AJ Brown and Devontae coming back. That could get better, but that game against the Saints was horrible. They probably should have lost it. I mean, you could argue this team could be winless right now, and that's really sad knowing the talent they have. I don't know what to think of this Eagles team. They're in a very weird situation right now. I'm going to trust that the high-end talent can bail them out and that they're better than their record advertises. It's been a tough schedule for them so far as well, so maybe after the bye week, they'll look a bit better. At number 13, I'm putting down the Atlanta Falcons. Genuinely, they have looked like one of the better teams in the league in my opinion, or at the very least, one of the more competent ones. After week 1, they've been turning up the heat. They've looked good in pretty much every game they've played. They've been right in them. They almost beat the Chiefs, which is awesome. Those big wins over the Eagles and the Saints have to count for something. They're showing me they can hang in there with the top teams. And over time, they should get better knowing the high upside that offense has and how the defense has been able to generate turnovers. If Atlanta can go on a bit of a win streak, they will more than earn my trust to in all likelihood enter the top 10 of my rankings. Number 12, the Green Bay Packers. Number 12. The Green Bay Packers. I am pleasantly surprised to see this team currently sitting at 2-2 after the Jordan Love injury. Some people are going to say it's an indictment on the guy, that the only games this team has won so far have come with Malik Willis at quarterback, but what I see is promise. What I see is upside. If Jordan Love and that offense can hone everything in, make some better choices when they're on the football field, this team's going to be very dangerous, and I would not be surprised if they rip off a big win streak here in October. Jordan Love, right after injury, looked good out there. He made some bad reads for sure with the picks, but he threw for over 300 yards. This Packers offense is high octane, clearly, and I love that they're generating turnovers on defense. Xavier McKinney has been a massive pickup for this team, and I heavily believe in this Packers team to turn it around and have a great month now that things are more normal. They're going to rip off those wins. We saw a similar thing happen last year. It is coming. I believe in the Pack. Number 11, the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'd be lying to you if I said that I expected the Steelers to be first place in their division after the first month. It hasn't always been the prettiest football, but that's just how the Steelers have been. They find a way to be relevant anyway. They make it through those matches, and honestly, since week 3 started, I feel like things have slowly but surely looked better. The offense is starting to wake up. Justin Fields is maybe feeling a bit more confident in this new system. He likes how the Steelers are rallying around him, and we even saw him put up over 300 yards against the Colts last weekend, which is a great sign of progress. The Steelers team plays a lot of mistake-free football, and their defense can keep them in just about any game they play. And honestly, if it weren't for Anthony Richardson getting injured, if they were prepared to play against him rather than Joe Flacco, then they might have beaten the Colts as well and still be undefeated at this very moment. I love where the Steelers team is at, and there's potential for them to keep on moving forward. Starting off, my top 10 will be the Seattle Seahawks. They're coming off a rough loss to the Lions on Monday night, but generally, they've looked pretty damn good out there, putting up 20 plus in every single contest in their sleep. Love the way the offense looks. Geno Smith is firing it downfield with confidence. The O-line's been holding up. Kenneth Walker, when healthy, has been extremely effective. This is a good, competitive football team that have shown at least some strides on defense. There was a lot of talk that they just played some really bad teams, Denver, New England, the Dolphins without Tua. It's true, but the fact that they were competitive against the Lions is all I needed to see to know that this team is competent and they can compete with a lot of the top dogs in the league. And at number 9, I cannot believe I'm saying this, I have the Washington Commanders. The Commanders have genuinely been one of the best teams in football. They are red hot on a 3-game winning streak. Jaden Daniels is on a heater. He looks like the man right now, probably the best rookie in the class, arguably, alongside Malik Neighbors. He has been popping off. He seems to always make the right decision. That Commanders offense is efficient. They don't make a lot of dumb mistakes. They get into the red zone consistently. It doesn't always result in touchdowns, but it seems like the last few weeks they're improving heavily upon that. This offense is really hard to stop. In its nature, it's not very complex. But when the ball is snapped is when things get a bit more dangerous. You have a super fast dual threat quarterback who is more confidently taking shots downfield recently. The run game has a lot of options as well. This Commanders offense is a nightmare to deal with under Cliff Kingsbury. And while that defense severely holds them back, if they continue to eat up clock and just do well with all of their offensive possessions, it may not matter. The Commanders like to be randomly good every once in a while, and this seems like it might be the year. Or maybe from now on, it will be consistent because Jaden Daniels looks insane. Number 8, the San Francisco 49ers. Maybe I'm being too biased because of last year and how capable this roster is. I know they're only 2-2 right now, but there's just too much upside to not have them at least in the top 10. They're gonna figure things out. Their offense has been a little on the unhealthy side. I believe over time they'll look more like the 49ers that we're used to. We saw the potential in week 1 against the Jets. They had a tough loss against the Vikings, but this Vikings team is clearly really good, so I don't give them a lot of crap for that. And that Rams game was just a rough one as well with all the injuries. I think there are a lot of freak games that happen with this Niners team, and they'll play better moving forward. Although I would keep a big eye on Christian McCaffrey, as we don't know when he'll come back, if ever this season. Not to mention that we're looking to see Brandon Ayuk play better as well. Since getting that contract, not a lot of effort out of him. The Niners need to improve on offense for sure, but the upside is there, so for now I think it's safe to say they're still top 10. And at number 7, I'm putting the Houston Texans down. It hasn't always been the prettiest from these guys, but they still are 3-1 right now, and like with San Fran, just so much upside with CJ Stroud and all those weapons on offense. I'm sure when Joe Mixon comes back from injury as well, they'll look a bit more consistent out there too, but they've been getting the job done. There's been some tough games. They won 2 big divisional matches. This Texans team is exactly where they'd like to be. They're not as dominant as I'd like to see them be, but generally, they still are like their old selves last year with CJ Stroud and the boys just moving the ball downfield with ease. That Vikings game is definitely an indictment on them, but again, it seems like nobody can handle Minnesota right now, so I'm willing to give them a pass at least for now, although I would like to see them pick it up just a little bit here in October. Number 6, the Buffalo Bills. I don't know what it is about Buffalo this season, but I find myself liking them a lot more than I thought I would heading into this season. There are issues, especially defensively, and it seems like they're getting thinner with Von Miller being suspended for a bit, but I just like how they responded to adversity this offseason. It seems like they have more of a positive attitude, and I feel like they're going to bounce back from that Baltimore game like it didn't even happen heading into the future. Josh Allen seems happier that he doesn't have to target Stephon Diggs a million times a game. They've been scrappy. They've been putting up a ton of points out of that Baltimore game. I like where this Buffalo team stands. They feel new and improved despite losing some big-time weapons on both sides of the ball after the offseason. They may not be the best team overall, but with Josh Allen leading the way, there's always a chance for this team to be good. I'm not going to put too much crap on them just because they lost one game, at least not yet. And heading into the top 5, I'm starting off with the Baltimore Ravens. Seemingly like everybody else on the list, they had that one dud game. It was not pretty. They choked a 10-point lead to the Raiders, but outside of that, I've liked what I've seen from Baltimore. They've been winning with conviction. They've looked promising. They were competitive against the Kansas City Chiefs in their matchup with them. And while I don't love the second half of that game against Dallas, the first half was great and showed us this team can absolutely dominate and blow people out of the water, just like what we saw in that Buffalo game. They've beaten and or been competitive with some very tough teams this year. I'm concerned over the whole blown lead thing. Clearly is still a problem they have to work on, but slowly but surely, this Ravens team's going to look more comfortable, I feel like. Lamar looks confident out there. Him and Derrick Henry have been a nightmare to deal with on the run game. I like how much they're getting Zay Flowers involved with the offense this season. This Ravens team is still very dangerous and are very easily one of the best teams in the league. Number 4, the Detroit Lions. This team has had some uncomfortably close games so far, I will admit that, but that's just the type of style that Detroit's always had. They usually don't blow people out. They're that scrappy, grindy team that usually finds ways to win, and that's what they've done so far outside of a tough loss to Tampa Bay. But even that was a really close game, and on a different day, they probably end up winning it. In my opinion, this team's simply coasting until the playoffs because that's what they're really thinking about. But until then, they'll continue to gamble and be that high-powered offense that we know and love, although I'd like to see them get Sam Laporta just a bit more involved moving forward. Number 3, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Some people may say this is a little too high and that they should be below Detroit, but they did beat the Lions at the end of the day, so I do feel like I'm obligated to put them higher at least for now. Generally, this Bucs team has been very impressive. They're not only picking up from where they did last year, but the offense looks even better. Baker Mayfield looks more confident than I think I've ever seen him look before with how easily he's chucking the ball downfield, finding the likes of Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. This offense has been moving so well so far this year, and they've blown out some good teams, the Eagles and the Commanders, the big win over Detroit. That Broncos loss is definitely worth considering, but I kind of think of it as a one-off thing. I think they'll move on from it. They'll have those duds once in a while. That's just how Baker and this Bucs team operates, but generally they look like they're right in the thick of it as one of the best teams in the NFC. And at number 2, I cannot believe I'm saying this, I'm going with the Minnesota Vikings, who take such a massive leap compared to where I had them in the preseason. They have surpassed all expectations anybody could have possibly put on them. Defensively, I mean, Brian Flores has renovated that group completely. Schematically, they've been a nightmare. They've been blitzing. They've been forcing turnovers. It's been a masterpiece to watch. And then there's Sam Darnold, who has transformed himself into one of the best quarterbacks in the league statistically so far this season. He looks like a man possessed. I've never seen this version of Sam Darnold before. It is one of the most pleasant surprises and one of the most epic comeback stories in recent memory. I am genuinely so amazed at how well balanced this team feels. They feel like they can actually be a contender. It's still early on, but the proof is right there in front of you. They have shown they can hang in there with any of the top teams. They beat 3 top contenders heading into this season, most of them with relative ease. The Texans, the 49ers, and the Packers, they made short work of those guys, going up big on all of them. This Vikings team is no joke, and they are absolutely one of the beasts of the league. And finally, at number 1, I'm picking the Kansas City Chiefs. Honestly, the Vikings have been a lot more dominant, so maybe you could argue they are the number 1 team, but the Chiefs are the 2-time defending Super Bowl champions, and they're undefeated still, so I feel obligated to keep them at number 1 for the time being. What's important about this team is that despite them playing a lot of close contests, they have figured out a way to win. Good teams always do that. They usually find the solution. This Chiefs team can always execute in the clutch, and that is something that not a lot of other teams can say. So long as Pat Mahomes and Coach Reid are there, this Chiefs team is always going to be one of the best. Although I will say, with all the injuries piling up, their stocks could be plummeting at least a little bit in the near future. Now that Rashee Rice has also gone down, they are missing multiple top targets. That is a big adjustment to be made, and we could see this Chiefs team struggle as we head to the mid-season. But for now, I will confidently keep them at number 1, and that is where my power rankings will conclude for this month. Let me know what you think of my spots 1 through 32 down in the comments below. I know some of it is very confusing, but this is where I'm at right now with how weird this season has been. Let me know what your rankings are looking like as well, and if you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a like and subscribe for more NFL content just like this every single week.